Good morning. Today's daf is daf Kuf Chaf Tet, 129 in Batra. We are in the middle of discussing the laws of inheritance. I'm going to share my screen and we'll get really started. Yesterday, we learned the 7 rulings that Rabbi Abba sent to Rabbi Yosef Bar Chama. Only one of them was relevant to well, 2 of them actually, I guess, dealt with some aspect of a state law. But one of them was specifically relevant to the concept of a Bechor, and it resolved the issue of whether or not a father has the ability to identify the firstborn, even if the community has a chazaka. There are no witnesses, but has a chazaka that a different child is the firstborn, different son is the firstborn. So notwithstanding that, the father has the ability to sort of correct the record. Now, and that was because we learned that we concluded yesterday with Mar Zutra reporting that the halacha is like Rabbi Abba in each of the 7 rulings. So now, as we're going to pick up on the bottom of Daf Kuf Chaf Chet Amud Bet, bottom line, middle of the line, the Gemara is going to wonder why it was necessary for Mar Zutra to make this statement. So please excuse me. All right. Bella Hilchasa La Pukimai. When Mar Zutra says that the halacha is like Rabbi Abba, what is he trying to come to exclude? What is he trying to say is not the halacha? As we turn to Kuf Chaf Tet Amud Aleph, Ila Pukim de Rava. If you want to say that it's about Rava's statement, so what is Rava's statement? Take a look in Rashbam. Rashbam puts it very nicely in context. The Amar who said, Rava said, Af Berish top Rashbam on Dav Kuf Chaf Tet Amud Aleph. The Amar Af Berishon, even when it comes to the first generation, that when you testify, when a third generation person, meaning a great grandchild of somebody, testifies against a first generation person, meaning a great uncle, that's permitted. But hello, Mosivu. We're going to now read the Rashi, the Rashbam is explaining the next words in the Gemara as well, and that's the whole point of that is he's adding to it. So let's read those words in the Gemara. Mosivhu, right? He's adding to what was said, and now back into Rashbam. Mosivhu al divrei Rabbi Abba. He's actually adding to what Rabbi Abba said. He's not arguing with Rabbi Abba. He's just adding. Da Amar Shlishi B'Sheni, right? Rabbi Abba said, Da Amar Shlishi B'Sheni Kasher. Rabbi Abba said that a third generation could testify about a second generation, meaning a cousin once removed can testify about the cousin. And now Rava comes to say that even with the great uncle you'd be able to testify. And one can say Rabbi Abba and there's nothing that suggests that Rabbi Abba might not also agree. Rabbi Abba, and yet we still need Rabbi Abba Lashmin and Dishlishi B'Sheni Kasher. Because you would still need to tell me that the third with the second is kosher. The Ikalaman Damar Sanhedrin puzzle, because there's another view in Sanhedrin that says that that's puzzle. So beperek zeborer daf kaf chedam aleph the lavla midak mina pashlishi berishon puzzle, and you can't necessarily determine from that a third generation to a first generation is going to be puzzled. The Dilma Uvda Havi Bishlishi Bisheni Vishalach Lady Kasher. Maybe this was just what actually happened, that the reason that Rabbi Abba was telling the halacha about a third generation to a second generation, the first cousin once removed case, is just because that was the case that existed. And so Rabbi Abba was ruling in that case. But that doesn't necessarily tell us what Rabbi Abba would say about the child, the great grandchild and the great uncle, that maybe they would have, they would also be permitted. So the bottom line is that you can't necessarily tell whether or not it's excluding Rava's statement. and Idamar bar Rav Ashi. And if you want to say, well, okay, so maybe he's coming to exclude Mar bar Rav Ashi. Well, Leis Hilchas of Gemar bar Rav Ashi. And remember, Mar bar Rav Ashi was the one, Rashbam tells us in the next Rashbam, Mar bar Rav Ashi, de Akasher ba'aba de Abba, who said that you could testify about a grandfather. Hakvar Ifsik de Leis Hilchas of Gavasi. We already know that the halacha is not like him. Kedam Rinam Leil, as we said earlier. Vahak Drasha de Mar Zutra Basar Haki Havi. Right, and the whole teaching of Mar Zutra was after that statement that the halacha is not like Mar Baravashi. So why would Mar Zutra need to tell us? V'hachinami havia de Mar Baravashi tosefes ella da'adiva mina kapara. Now you could also point out that that's just an extra thing again. And just as we answered with Rava, but the point is that there's an even stronger answer. So as a result, the Gemara gives that answer. So that's possibility number 2 as to what the chiddush might be that we have rejected. Now, possibility number 3, which we will also reject. Ila pukim Shmuel. Right now, we're on the third line of Daf Kuf 10 Amud Aleph. Ila pukim Shmuel. If you want to tell me it's to exclude Shmuel, the Rav Sheshes, the Rav Papa, hi itosavu. We already, they had the argument, right? In connection with they had the argument in connection with the different statements as to when a what was it? That was the statement as to what kind of let's see, that was what a person who changed their status could testify about, right? That they said that whether they could testify if they were blind, whether they could testify about the property size or the size of the garment, or the weight of a metal bar. And we said in all of those cases, we had refuted we had used a brisa to refute their opinion. So we don't need that. We don't need to tell us that either. Ella la pupikim de Rabbi Yochanan. So what is Mar Zutra coming to tell us? He's coming to exclude from Rabbi Yochanan. And what does Rashbam say? De Amar Eino Naaman Kirabanan. He's the one who disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda, right? We say Rabbi Yehuda says that if a father testifies, even though there's a contrary chazaka, we believe the father. And it was Rabbi Yochanan and the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Abba, and they say, no, if there's a chazaka that one child is the firstborn, the father doesn't have the ability to undermine that chazaka. Askafta demar baravashi, and it also eliminates the objection of Mar Baravashi. What does that refer to? Let's take a look in the Rashbam, about 10 lines down, 11 lines down in the Rashbam. The Asalamemer Vadai Meshiv Avadahu, that he was said that in the case where I come to Stan with a document, and the document says that Stan owes me $100. Stan says, listen, I admit that I owe you $50, but that's all I owe you. And then Stan brings witnesses who say that that Stan paid back the full $100 of my document. So as a result, Mar Baravashi was saying that wasn't a case where Stan should have to swear. That's a case where Stan is effectively returning something that doesn't belong to returning a lost object. Just like the case, right, that we saw when it comes to if I had a document that said that Stan owed me coins, I said that Stan owed me 5 coins, and Stan says that he owes me 3 coins. Now, coins, if Stan had just said 2, we would believe him, and that would be it. But the fact that he now says 3, is that considered returning something, or is that considered a partial admission? So Mar Baravashi was saying, if that's considered a returning of something, well, then surely this would be considered a returning of something. The Leis Hilchos Kavase, continuing on in the Rashbam, and the halachas not like Mar Baravashi. Kaven de Akasi Shahoda, because the situation where he admit lo he idu edim. The key is, although Stan ends up being supported by witnesses, and indeed the witnesses go further and say that he doesn't know anything, the witnesses only come later. Stan didn't know what the witnesses were going to say when he admitted the lo commissariale. And so Ika Lamemar Demirtas Minayu, that maybe he's afraid of them. She'ena Yodea Mabalibam Karebi Abba, that in fact Rabbi Abba's logic is correct, that because he doesn't know what they're going to say, he's going to partially admit because he doesn't want to completely contradict them. That would look really bad for him. So as a result, he's going to partially admit, and that's why he does have to swear. And so Mar Barav Ashi's objection is rejected. And again, that's what Mar Zutra is telling us, that why the halacha is like Rabbi Abba. So basically, the bottom line is that there are 2 points that Mar Zutra ends up highlighting. One is that we follow Rabbi Yehuda and not the Rabbanan, and the second is that we follow Rabbi Abba and not Mar Baravashi. Okay, so now we go back to our Mishnah, and in that Mishnah,
this was just a little bit confusing. Following all of this, is it possible just to who didn't follow who, and the third and fourth and the second and third first? So can we just maybe summarize this in a few sentences? So
sure, okay,
going back to
happy
Rashbam
to
and the
summarize.
Gemara, it's hard to follow all of that.
100%. So there were 7 statements that Rabbi Abba made.
I know.
The halacha is like him in every case. The 2 cases where Mar Zutra is emphasizing, and that why it was necessary for Mar Zutra to make his statement, is because one is that we say the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda and not the Rabbanan. Rabbi Yehuda, whom the Rabbi Abba agreed with, namely that a father has the ability to testify about the status of his son, notwithstanding the fact that there's a chazaka about another son being the firstborn. So that's statement number 1. That's halacha number 1, that we say the halacha follows Rabbi Abba and Rabbi Yehuda and not Rabbi Yochanan and the Rabbanan. And then the second statement relates to what happens in the case if I claim from Stan $100, Stan with a contract, with a document, Stan admits to $50, and then he brings you and Moshe as witnesses, and you and Moshe say that actually he paid back the full $100 of the contract that I'm holding. And so as a result, the question is, do we say that Stan's partial admission is a partial admission, and therefore he swears a moda b'mitzvah shvua, and if he swears, he only has to give me 50? Or do we say, no, it's more like the returning of a lost object, and when you return a lost object, there's no obligation to swear, even if the person who lost the object says, well, where was the rest of the object that I lost? The person who returns it doesn't have to swear because of tikkun olam. So in a different case elsewhere, Rabbi Akiva had said that in fact a situation of coins and 3 versus 5 should be considered returning a lost object. But Rabbi Abba said that we don't apply that principle here, that even Rabbi Akiva would agree that in this case, it's not like returning a lost object, because when Stan makes his oath, he doesn't know what the witnesses are going to say. And so as a result, like our general moda b'mikzas principle, the reason that you need to swear in moda b'mikzas is we're worried that you owe the whole amount. You don't want to be obnoxious and reject the whole amount, so you're not going to do that. But really, you just need a little bit more time, so you're going to do moda b'mikzas. You'll admit half of it. But the truth is, you owe the whole amount now, and you need to pay the whole amount now. And you obviously you can negotiate some kind of settlement, but we're not going to let you impose a delay on the rest of the amount, and so we're going to make you swear. And so that oath, we're going to also have you swear in this case, even though Mar Baravashi said no, we shouldn't have the person swear. So that's the second law that again that Mar Zutra is emphasizing that the halacha is like Rabbi Abba.
So he's more to
Okay.
a mitzvah, and ultimately he has to pay the rest of it, right?
Yes, yes. If you swear that you don't owe the half that you swear that you say you didn't owe, you get away with not paying that half because we presume that in fact you're telling the truth and you did pay it back, and you'd pay the other half that you've admitted. So here, even though there's no document effectively because the witnesses, you and Moshe, came to effectively knock out the document because you say the document was repaid. But I still made a claim of $100 from Stan, and Stan still admitted to half, and so as a result, Stan has to swear a moed b'mitzvah's oath and pay the other half if he makes that oath. Okay, so those are the two laws that we end up saying that the halacha is like Rabbi Abba and are important because we're distinguishing those opinions from a third party. Okay, so now we go back to our Mishnah, and our Mishnah noted that a father could not increase the share of some children at the expense of others when done as an inheritance. But it works when done with the word giving at the beginning, at the middle, or at the end. So now the Gemara is going to clarify what does that mean. So hamachalak nechasav al piv riba le'echad umiyat le'echad. Again, that's the quote from the Mishnah, and we said at the end that you need to have the language of giving in the beginning, the middle, or the end. So heiki dami matana betchila, heiki dami be'emsa, heiki dami besof. What does it mean to have giving at the middle, the beginning, the middle, or the end? So ki asa Rav Dimi Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So when Rav Dimi came, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Tinasin sada plonis leploni v'yarasha. That if I say, give this field to somebody as an inheritance, zohi matana betchila, right? I said, give it. And then I said, as an inheritance. So the point is, so as a result, it's a gift, and therefore it's a valid transaction. Yirsha v'tinasin lo, let him inherit it, and then give it to him, and it shall be given to him. Zohi matana beso. That's what it means when you say the matana at the end. So again, because even though you use the language of inheritance, it's really a gift and it's given. Yerusha v'tinasin lo v'yerusha. If you say let him be an inheritance for him, then it should be given to him, and he's going to inherit it. Zohi matana be'emsa. That's the middle, meaning that you can have references to matana before and after. The key is that you have at least a reference to giving at some point in the conversation. V'davka ba'adam echad v'sada achad. And now this only works, according to Rav Dimi, according to Rabbi Yochanan, this only works when you have one field and one person. Aval ba'adam echad ushtei sados, sada achas ushne b'nei adam, lo. But if you have two people and one field, or one person and two fields, and actually the Gemara said it in the other order, it does not work. So what is that talking about? Let's take a look in the Rashbam. The Rashbam is about 11 lines up from the end of the narrow lines in the Rashbam Kuchav Teramid Aleph. Kagon Yirish Ruvain Sada Plonis Shebemizrach V'tinasim Lo LeRuvain Sada Plonis Shebemarav. So I say to Ruvain, you're going to get as a gift. I'm giving you the western field, and you're inheriting the eastern field. Well, the gift of the western field, that works. Hahu de lashon matana kani. That actually works. Aval hahu de lashon Yerusha lo kani. The matana deheich lo misayeya leidach. Because the fact that I used a language of gift with respect to the western field tells me nothing about what I intend to do with respect to the eastern field. Elazos horish lo, vizos nasan lo. This one is an inheritance, and this one is a gift. Ubehidi Yerusha havi matana al masha kasa b'Torah. having matna al masha kasa b'torah. And now that you try to give it as an inheritance and you're violating what it says in the Torah, the lo amar klum, you haven't said anything. V'chein b'sada achat. And similarly with one field, u'shnei b'nei adam, and two people, kagon Ruvain yirish chatzi sada zu, v'tinasan chatzia l'shimon. Right? If I say that Reuben's going to inherit half this field, and Shimon's going to be given the other half, Shimon kana, the Reuven lo kana. Shimon gets it, Reuven doesn't. But kol shekain beis sados v'beis b'nei adam, and certainly if you had two people and two fields, could go Reuven yirish sada plonis, Shimon tenasin sada plonis acheres. That if I say a gift for you, well then you get it. And if I say an inheritance for you, even though I said a gift to somebody else, you don't get it because inheritance doesn't work because you're not one of my heirs. Okay. So that's the situation. That's what Rav Dimi says in the name of Rav Yochanan. We're now going to
But
have.
what if one of them was an heir?
Well, we'll deal with that. We're going to get to that. But right now, it's definitely not an heir. Because if it was an heir, well, then it would work. And then we get into the machlokis, which we're going to deal with at the very beginning of tomorrow's daf, where we have Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, who says that when you give to heirs, you're allowed to increase and decrease as much as you want. So a completely different set of rules is going to apply in that with a different machlokis. So therefore, it's very clear that this Gemara is not talking about heirs. It's talking about third parties. And we will, on occasion, bring in order to resolve disputes or resolve inconsistencies in the Gemara, we'll bring in the case of heirs. But for right now, all the cases that we're dealing with are non-heirs. Rabbi Lazar Omer, afilu adam echad ushtei sados. Rabbi Lazar disagrees with Rabbi Yochanan, according to Rav Dimi, and says that even one person and two fields, or sadeh achat ushnei b'nei adam, or one field and two people, in both cases, it's going to, the usage of giving shows that when you use the word inheritance right next to it, what you really mean is a gift. But when it comes to two people and two fields, Rabbi Lazar would say, lo, that's going too far. So again, we have, according to Rav Dimi, the views of Rabbi Yochanan and the views of Rabbi Lazar. The view of Rabbi Yochanan is it only works with one person and one field. The view of Rabbi Lazar, it works with one person or one field. And the only situation where it doesn't work is when you have two people and two fields. Ki asa Ravin Amar, when Ravin came, he disagreed with Rabbi Dimi on an aspect of what Rav Dimi said. Tinos and Sada Plonis Leploni, the Yirish Ploni Sada Leplonis. If I say that this person is going to be given this field and another person is going to be inheriting that field, so this is a case of two people and two fields, Rabbi Yochanan Amar Kana. Rabbi Yochanan says it does work. So whereas before Rabbi Yochanan said you have to be one person and one field, now according to Ravin, it could even be two people and two fields. And Rabbi Lazar Omer lo kana. And Rabbi Lazar says it doesn't work. So Amar le Abaye le Ravin. Abaye questions Ravin on chatas lan chada, askafta lan chada. You've made it easy for one, meaning Rabbi Lazar is consistent because you said it works for it doesn't work for two. Well, that's consistent with Rav Dimi, who told us that Rabbi Lazar says it works with one person or one field, but not two people and two fields. But you've made it tough for us with respect to Rabbi Yochanan, because Rav Dimi had said Rabbi Yochanan requires one person and one field. And now you're saying that Rabbi Yochanan allows even two people and two fields. So Bishlam at the Rebbe Lazar, ad the Rebbe Lazar lo kasha, there's no contradiction at all. Kan ba'adam achad, ushtei sadot, kan b'shnei b'nei adam, ushtei sadot. One is in one person and two fields, and one is two people and two fields. So there's no inconsistency at all. Oh, the Rabbi Yochanan kasha, it's difficult because one place he says he requires one person and one field, and the other one, it allows two people and two fields. So Amorai Ninhu. It's a machlokas Amoraim Aliba de Rabbi Yochanan. So actually, what's going on is that Ravin and Rav Dimi disagree about what Rabbi Yochanan said, and that their disagreement is based on an Amoraic disagreement about what Rabbi Yochanan said. Okay. Now we have now three different opinions. Opinion number one of Rav Dimi in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, it only works with one. The
One what?
one
One
person,
person, one field, one
one
what?
person, one field. One person, one field. Then we have Rav Dimi and Rebbe Lazar and Ravin and Rebbe Lazar. So everybody agrees that Rebbe Lazar says you need one person or one field. One person or one field. And then we have Ravin's view of Rabbi Yochanan, who says it works two people and two fields. Now we get a fourth, potentially a fourth opinion. The Reish Lakish Amar Lo Kana Ad Sheyomer Ploni Uploni Yirshu Sada Ploni Suplonis. That Shinasatim Lahem B'matana Virshum. That you have to say this entire language. Well, it's unclear exactly what he's trying to say here, but let's go through it.
What
That
did you
if I
mean one
say,
person or one field? Does that mean one person and two fields, or one person or one field and two persons?
yes, that's exactly what one person
Okay.
or one field means.
Okay.
Okay. So Reish Lakish says the following: if that it only works to make a gift of one of when you have two people and two fields, it only works if you use the following and you had the language of inheritance. It only works if you use the following setup. You have these two person A and B are going to inherit this field and that field, which I'm giving them as gifts, and they shall inherit them. So the issue is, and the Rashbam explains it, but we're not going to go through it because we're already running behind on time. That we're going to go inside, but we'll go through it outside. The idea is that you need to have an explanation that has the word giving attributed to each person. And the issue is if I say that I'm that field A and field B, I am giving and inheriting to Stan and to Ken. The concern is that in that kind of language, maybe the giving only applies to Stan because I said Stan first and I said giving first, and the inheriting only applies to Ken because I said Ken's name second, and I said inheriting second. So as a result, you need, if I'm going to reference both inheriting and giving, I need to have the order of inheriting, giving, inheriting, because that way there's no question that I'm applying it to everybody because I'm applying both to each person. So as a result, it's only by saying shinasatim lahem b'matana that I'm giving as a gift. So that's a double language. That giving as a gift, now it will work because one of those givings is clearly intended for one of the people, and the other giving is clearly intended for the other person. We will come back to Reish Lakish at the very end of today's daf. But for the moment, we can put him to the side. But in the end, he is not necessarily disagreeing with the other three opinions. We are going to qualify him at the very end. So
isn't this a bit of legal fiction? Because in the end, he's causing them to inherit only after he passes away. So he says, "I'm giving it to you," but it's an inheritance. But
the gift is happening immediately. It happens right away. This is not well, the key is that it's happening from now, meaning it's this field is going to be yours essentially after I die. I mean, it's unclear whether it immediately takes effect or whether it only takes effect upon the person's death. But even if we say it only takes effect upon the person's death, it is a gift from now for after the death. And so the point is that if you only use inheritance language because you violated the Torah and you're causing an inheritance to somebody to whom they're not entitled to an inheritance, it's not going to work. That's the key element here. And the question is how much of a discussion of gift do I have to include in my conversation to make it clear that even though I use the language of inheritance, my intention is gift?
Right. So that's what I think I'm saying, in that if he gives, he wants to retain this while he's alive, and he's giving it to them only that takes effect only after he dies. So, but he says, yeah, you're going to quote inherit it, but I'm really giving it to you, but you're not getting it now. You're only going to get it after I die. So he has to use both words in order to satisfy everything. But it's really sort of an inheritance, but it's also sort of a gift.
And that's why, if you do one person and one field, everybody agrees that the language that you just used works. The problem is, what happens if you use that language for one person, but you use only the inheritance language for a different person? Do we say that because you used the language of gift with respect to person number A, person number one, that we also assume that you meant to do the language of gift for person number two, even though you didn't use the language of gift? You only used the language of
I would
inheritance.
say no.
Well, then you would agree with Rav Dimi's view of Rabbi Yochanan. But that's not everybody's viewpoint. Some people say, listen, it was one conversation. You were talking about one conversation, and we know this person can't actually inherit it. So what must you have meant? You must have meant it the same way that you meant the other one. Okay, so that's precisely the disagreement, and you can have your opinion about it, but that's precisely the disagreement. And now we're going to see that the three opinions that we saw, Ravin according to Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Lazar according to everybody, and Rav Dimi according to Rabbi Yochanan, those three opinions are going to match up with three more opinions. So Beplukta Amar Rav Hamnuna lo shanu ela adam echa b'sadeh achat. That's like Rav Dimi's view of Rabbi Yochanan. Aval adam echad ushtei sados, and it's also Ken's view. Aval adam echad ushtei sados sadeh achat ushnei bnei adam. Lo, then it doesn't work. So, and the Rav Nachman says something different. Afilu adam echad ushtei sados sadeh achat ushnei bnei adam. Aval shtei sadot ushnei bnei adam lo. He says exactly like Rabbi Lazar according to everybody, both Rabbi Lazar according to Rav Dimi and Rabbi Lazar according to Ravin. So as a result, that's Rav Nachman's view. And finally, Rav Sheshes Amar, afilu shtei sados ushnei bnei adam. Even two people and two fields, it'll work. And let's take a look at oh no, you know what? I've gone through it inside. The Rashbam literally lines up inside how Rav the alignment that I just gave you. So all right, so Amar Rav Sheshes, mina la. How do I know this? The Tanya. How do I know that I'm right? That two fields and two people, it will work if I use the language of giving to one and inheriting to the other. It's still going to work, even though I'm talking about two different fields. So as a result, maybe you could argue it's two completely concepts, but we're going to say that it does work. So mina la, the Tanya haomer tnu shekel lebonai b'Shabbos. I give a shekel to my children every week. But really, if you were to calculate how much do they need in order to live, they need a sela. They need 2 shekel. So then no sin lehen sela. Then even though I had said that they should be given a sela, a shekel, you should double it and give them what they actually need, because my language should not be interpreted so precisely. Now, by the way, what case are we talking about? So Rashbam explains 1, 2, 3, 6 lines up in the Rashbam, very end of the line. Haomer tnu shekel, kagon shchiv mira, like somebody on their deathbed. Inami bari, the kagon shahalach l'medina sayam, somebody who's healthy and he's going overseas. So we'll say that that's the case that I'm talking about. The tziva litein lahem keshir hazeh, and I say, give this amount. Ad sheyakala hamamon kulo, until the money gets exhausted. You know, God willing, I'll be back in time and it won't get exhausted. But if it does, then my children are out of luck. Okay, so v'im amar. But if I say al tednu lahen el a shekel, if I say give them only a shekel, well then ein noslin lahem el a shekel. Then even if they need more than a shekel, you just give them a shekel. V'im amar, and if I say the imesu, if they were to die, yirshu acherim tachteyem, others should inherit them. Meaning, as Rashbam explains, yirshu achreinim, ploni uploni, v'lo b'nei b'nai. These other people should inherit, not my children's children. Galia daite, which that shows the nichale tzimtzum tfei. It shows that I want to limit the amount that's being given out because I want to make sure that these other people inherit. Ki hechi lishtiyur mehanu nechase lahanu acherim. So clearly, I intend that there should be estate left over for these other people. The dafka ka'amar shek, and therefore, back in the Gemara and
How
middle
can we
of the
do
top
that?
line.
Weren't we saying that the
Give me just a
inheritance
second.
can
Let's finish the line, and then you can ask a question. Bein sha'amar tnu, bein sha'amar tnu, bein sha'amar al titnu, einos lahen ela shekel. No matter what language I used, even if I was vague about the amount that you should be given, we are only going to give the amount that I said and not more, even though my children really need more. But I was trying to limit it in order to facilitate this inheritance for other people. Now, we have not yet fully brought the proof for Rav Sheshes. So we're going to have to hold on for a moment, but you had a question. So that is a good point to ask the question.
What you said, where was it? The Rashbam, ploni ploni lo benai beni
B'nai
gal.
b'nai.
Right. So, and then it
Meaning
says
that
to
the
take
inheritance.
How can he give to cause inheritance to people who are not entitled to inherit?
Well,
According to the Torah.
let me finish the proof, and then you'll see exactly the point. V'hahacha. Now, 1 second. How does this work? This case, the kishtei sados u'shnei b'nei adam dami. It's exactly like 2 fields and 2 people, because we have my children, they're person number 1, and then we have the inheritors. That's person number 2, and there are 2 fields. One is the fixed amount, and Rashbam goes through this in more detail, but I don't have the time to go through it in detail. The Rashbam says that there's the field, there's the salary or allowance that I'm giving my children. That's one field, and then there's the entire estate that I'm giving of whatever's the remnants that I'm giving to the other people. And with my children, I use the language of give. And with the other people, I use the language of inheritance. So doesn't this show, because we're allowing the other people to inherit, that we recognize that my usage of the language of give with respect to my children shows that when I said the language of inheritance, I didn't mean inheritance in the classic biblical sense. I really meant gift. And so it's as if I had said with respect to those other people that I was giving them the money after my children pass away, right? So that's the effort at Rav Shesh's proof from this case.
But that seems to contradict everything we said before, that inheritance applies only to those people the Torah allows to inherit, and giving, you can give to anybody, but inherit, how?
It does not, because remember that what we're trying to prove right now is Rav Shesh's opinion. Rav Sheshes believes that if I say I want to give field A to Stan and I want Ken to inherit field B, I'm really giving you both fields. Both fields are being given to you. Even though I use the language of inheritance for you, Ken, because it's 2 people and 2 fields and it's said at the same time, we're going to understand that because I use the language of gift for Stan, I mean gift for you. Similarly, in this case, when it comes to the allowance, even though I use the language of inheritance for the people who are going to get after my children pass away, that language of inheritance was really modified by the fact that when I was saying gift, I was doing gift for my children. And so the same language of gift that applies to my children, I really mean that to apply to the other people as well.
He's distorting the meaning of the word. He's creating his own meaning.
In the context of where you use both a language of inheritance and a language of gift. It's It's saying what was the person's true intention. We're trying to understand. People.
Okay, but I still think he's distorting language. He's making this
Okay,
word
all
up
right.
to
You
suit
may
himself.
disagree with him, but I'm not sure that I have not sort of looked into the halakha, but I think that the halakha may even be like him. But all right, let's. He's going to now reject this proof, but we're going to have a different proof, and that proof is going to be successful. But let's see this proof. Who mosivla v'hu b'farikla. He raised it and he took it apart. B'roi liyorsho. Now, the case that we're talking about of the remnant people, of the people who are left over, is not like Rashbam said. Rashbam was just highlighting us the Hava Amina when it said Ploni Uploni below B'nai, that it was not my children's children. The other people were also potential heirs. And so as a result, consistent, the Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, and this is consistent with Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, that Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka says that I can, when I have a group of heirs, I can give more to some, I could give all to one and nothing to the others. I have that ability. And so as a result, when I do this, we're talking about I say Yershu Acherim Tachteim, that the others are going to inherit after my children, Admei Esrim. So as a result, that is really saying to other heirs, I'm saying these children. So for example, maybe two of my children are going to get the salary, are going to get the allowance, and then after they pass Admei Esrim, so then the rest is going to go to child number 3, who will get the remnants. And I'm allowed to do that according to Rabbi Yochanan Broka, because I can among my heirs, I can reallocate the amount, the way the inheritance goes.
But that seems to support what I'm saying before. You can't really go against who are inherit. They weren't inherit. He wasn't even talking about non-inheritors.
That's why we're going to bring another proof. So Amar Rav Ashi, we are now 1, 2, 3, 6 lines down on Daf Kuf Chav Tet Amud Bet. Tashma nechasai lecha va'acharecha yirash ploni va'acharecha yirash ploni. So if I say, here's a brisa. If I say my property goes to you, Ken, and then it goes to Stan, and then it goes to Moshe, so then and after you die, it goes to Stan, and after Stan dies, it goes to Moshe. So Meis Rishon Kana Sheni, Meis Sheni Kana Shlishi. So right, if when Admei Esrim, you die, Ken, it'll then go to Stan, and when Admei Esrim, Stan dies, it'll then go to Moshe, and that'll be the way it works. The Meis Sheni B'chaye Rishon. But if the second one were to die before the first one dies, Yachsaru Nechasim LeYorshe Rishon. We are the third guy, Moshe, is never going to get anything, because the only situation that Moshe is going to get is if Stan got first and then Stan passes away. But here, when Ken passes away, Stan has already passed away, and so as a result, we're going to say that it's Ken's heirs are going to get to keep the stuff instead of the third person. Well, 1 second. This is just like 2 fields and 2 people, because remember, my first statement was nechasai lecha as a gift. Right. So my first statement to Ken was a gift statement, and so as a result, and yet the next 2 people were inheritances statement, and yet those inheritance statements worked. The Katani Dekana, we said that they actually inherited. They took it. They actually acquired it. And all right, so you might want to say, well, let's just give the same answer that we gave by Rav Shesh's first proof, that in fact we're dealing with all 3 people who are fit to be my heirs. But that doesn't work. Because v'chi tema hakanami b'roi liyorsho v'Rabbi Yochanan ben Brokahi ihachi meis sheni v'kana shlishi. That doesn't work, because what's the halakha is not that if the second one dies, the third one acquires. Because Hashalach Rav Acha Breda Rav Avia, the Rav Acha son of Rav Avia, sent the following statement: L'divrei Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. According to Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, Nechasai lecha, the acharecha leploni. If I say that my inheritance goes to you and then to somebody else, the Rishon Roy Liyorsho, and the first person that I give it to is an heir, Ein l'sheni b'makom Rishon klum. I don't have the ability to change. So what? Although Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka allows one to allocate their estate as they see fit among the heirs,
Right.
it does not give the person the right to control those assets after the life of those heirs. So once it goes to one heir, it becomes theirs and is fully theirs, and they can do whatever they want with it, and I can't limit it to somebody else. So this must be talking about a gift of 3 people that are not my heirs. It must be talking about a situation of Ken, Stan, and Moshe. And so as a result, that's the situation that we must be talking about. So she'ein zeh, ein l'sheni b'makom Rishon klum, right? She'ein zeh lashon matana el lashon Yerusha, because it was done and not as a gift, but as an inheritance. The Yerusha ein la hefsek. An inheritance can't be interrupted. So as a result, that doesn't work. So we now have, and we end up saying, to yufta de kulo to yufta. We have upshlugged everybody else. Rav Sheshis is correct. Ravin's approach to Rabbi Yochanan is correct. That when you have 2 fields, notwithstanding the fact that Ken doesn't like it at all, when you have 2 fields and 2 people, and I use the language of gift with respect to one person and one field, and inheritance with respect to the other person and the other field, both are treated as gifts. Both, I clearly, because I'm doing them at the same time, I clearly intend them to be as gifts, and we're not going to try and work out my wording and say, oh, the guy said inheritance and he's not an heir, so it can't happen. And so as a result, we're going to reject what he says. No, we're going to say, what does the guy really mean? He means that he wants both of these gifts to be given. Clearly one to be given after he passes. So lema nami tehevi tiyuvta de Reish Lakish. So I said we were going to, at the end of the daf, bring back Reish Lakish. So maybe we should say that this also contradicts Reish Lakish, because remember, Reish Lakish said that you need to use very complicated language. He said that you need to use inheritance, gift, inheritance. And that way we would know that the 2 people, and again, this is where you make one statement about 2 people, A and B are going to get it and are going to inherit it and then gift it as a gift, and they're going to take it as an inheritance. And if those 2 fields, and so in that situation, we end up saying that it has to be that both people are getting a gift, and therefore it's a gift. But maybe if you use different language, it would not work. So why is that the case? The Tizbara. So maybe we should say it refutes Reish Lakish, and therefore it even simpler language with respect to 2 people and 2 pieces of property, it will work if you use one with respect to give and one with respect to inherit. The Tizbara, v'ha'amar Rava, hilchasa kavase de Reish Lakish. But we can't say that Reish Lakish is refuted, because we have a statement of Rava who says that the halacha is like Reish Lakish. Bahanas Tlas in these 3 situations, and one of them is our situation. So it can't be that we're upshlugging Reish Lakish. So lo kashya kan betol kedei dibor, kan la'achar kedei dibor. So when Reish Lakish made his ruling of the complicated language of saying inheritance, gift, inheritance, that's talking about where there were different statements. You weren't necessarily making all the statements at one time. And so as a result, that's why you need to use this formula. Because I first said, I'm giving field A to Stan. And then I said, 20 years later, I said, I'm giving I'm giving field A to Stan after my death, and then 20 years later, I say to Ken, I'm inheriting you. You're inheriting field B. Now, Ken's not my relative. He's not an heir. So maybe that gets rejected. Well, I can undo that rejection by using the formula that Reish Lakish gives. That if I now come and say, well, what I really mean is that Stan and Ken are going to inherit fields A and B, and take them and they will be given to them as a gift, and they will inherit them, then what I'm really saying is that they are going to both get those fields as gifts after Mea Esrim, I pass away. So that is how we end up resolving. So the halacha is both like Reish Lakish and like Rav Sheshes. So we take two people and two things. And now we're going to conclude the Hilchasa.
So which was the case of that was Kan La'acha Kedei Dibur? Which was the case of Betok Kedei Dibur?
Betok Kedei Dibur is Rav Sheshes's case. If I say in one statement that I'm giving field A to Stan and inheriting, and as Ken is going to inherit field B, then clearly my intention is Ken to take it as a gift, not as an inheritance, because I made a single statement, put them together, and therefore it's really one statement. And as a result, the language of gift that I said with respect to Stan is also clearly my intention with respect to Ken. But if I make those statements separate from one another, then we need to use Reish Lakish's formula. The Hilchasa that the halacha is anytime you make a statement within a certain amount of time, we usually say that it's the time that it says that it takes for somebody to say Shalom Aleichem Rebbe, that if you say anything, it's as if it's part of the first statement. Levar, with two exceptions. Ma'avodas kochavim, when it comes to idolatry, take a look at the bottom Rashbam. Shem hitfis o hiktza davar la'avodas kochavim. If I make something set aside for avodah zara, ubetokadei dibor chazerbo, and I retract it within tokadei dibor, afilu haki nesra, it's still going to be aser. Mishum chumra de avodas kochavim, because of the stringencies associated with avodas kochavim. We'll stop in that Rashbam. And the second and the last point is on the top of Kuf Lamed Amud Aleph, the Kiddushin. And it also, Tokadei Dibur, won't work when it comes to marriage. Meaning, if I say, Harei at mekudeshes li b'tabad zu, kedas Moshe v'Yisrael, and I say that to somebody, and then I say, oh, no, I didn't mean that at all, then we say that the person is considered married and not married. They have to take on all the stringencies as if they were married, because we're very worried that if, God forbid, we were to say, okay, we're going to, really, Tokadei Dibur should work, and therefore she shouldn't be married. But if she then marries somebody else and has children, people are going to say that her children are mamzerim. And so as a result, we say that you need to actually get a divorce in that case. And again, the Rashbam highlights that detail as well. So
it has to be before Adam, right? If he just says it in the field.
Yes, of course he has to do all that has to happen before Adam. And in fact, I think Rashbam even says that it's before Adam. But yes, in fact, b'fnei Adam. Kashim kiddush isha b'fnei Adam v'chazer v'amar b'tokadei dibur lahavu matana. Right. So he says, "Oh, I didn't mean it as a wedding. I meant it as a gift. I didn't mean to marry her. V'lo lahavu kedushin, and not as a kedushin. Ein shomin lo." That we don't agree, we don't listen to him. Umekudeshes ve'ena mekudeshes. They're treated as married and not married. V'chumra derabanan, and this is a rabbinic stringency. V'shum loaz mamzeret, because of the people saying or whispering about this mamzerot, that there will be a mamzer here. Im tinase la'akar below get, if she were to marry somebody else without a get. So we will pick up, God willing, from the Mishnah. Oh, sorry for not scrolling here. Pick up from the Mishnah, God willing, tomorrow, where we get to see Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka's statement inside. So stay tuned. Keep an eye on your WhatsApp as to whether or not, for most likely, it will be done after Shabbos. And of course, Ellie will be leading us over the weekend. Have a wonderful Shabbos.
Thank you.